in any event, just to kick things off, I'd like to ask each one of you just to give us some insights into how you're currently managing the process of content creation, to the extent to which it's done in-house versus outsourced. And I guess maybe if you could elaborate further on the relationship that you have with content creators that might be within your industry, including media owners. And I'll start on the end with Stefan.
Well, first of all, for the content, obviously, I think there are two opportunities. First is create content that you control, that your customers can see early on, and kind of prepare the decision to engage or not. I think that's an opportunity for brands and manufacturers. Another one is a learning opportunity because you track all that. So you can track the behavior that leads to a good lead. And that's what Chuck mentioned too, that you want to have a good quality lead because if you create a lot of garbage addresses, you won't be taken seriously. And then I think there's this tracking opportunity and the content opportunity. We tried different avenues. Many marketers don't have the time to write content. We're trying to create something like a content factory in a way, an agency that takes a briefing and then gives us back the article or a video or an infographic or whatever content we feel would describe that briefing best. And we also looked at licensing content from publishers. Let's say if we have an advertising deal, we would want some articles back. I like the idea, but it never materialized. So
Right.
this publisher, maybe because it's not focused enough on the solution, but we try everything, and it's still an open field.
But I would suggest for a media owner that's an opportunity. And if you've had a frustration, then any media owner sitting here might be thinking about how they can be provide you with a better incentive or a better kind of package to make that happen next time.
Yeah, there's definitely demand for good journalism in a way. The question is how it's sold, because it's usually tied to a media investment, and you don't, let's say if you spend X amount, then you get this amount of content, and that's not how you want to see that. No, you want to just buy a particular piece. And I think there can be something done in the pricing so that it becomes more accountable or more transparent on what you buy in terms of content.
I'm not sure you'll provide specifics necessarily, but just as a kind of a rough estimate, approximately how much of your content creation is in-house versus outsourced now?
I would say 70%, 80% in-house.
Right.
Actually, Siemens wants to become, at least that's what you hear sometimes if you listen to my colleagues, wants to become a publishing house, and we hired 2 editors from Bild-Zeitung, which is a German tabloid, and Handelsblatt. They are running basically communication. So journalism and journalists are very much in demand, and I think there is definitely something to be said about creating a professional operation within the company. But that's a global, so it's not trickled down to every country and every business unit at all. But the intention is there to become more like a publisher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Julien?
Well, we probably rely much more on agencies than what you do at Siemens for the content creation, and we're not necessarily happy with that because it's obviously very expensive. We would like to do more content creation in-house, but again, what I was describing as competencies in our teams is a challenge. So we know we need to go out to reach out to new competencies. I would say that the content, the meat, if you want, is out there throughout our dealer network. We have access to a lot of stories, which is mostly what we're interested in. I'm not even talking about the content which is like more traditional, the specs and the mostly spec sheets, etc., which comes from us. That's not a problem. But what the customers want really is stories, tips, understanding best practices, having great projects, to give them new ideas on how to use the equipment. And those stories are out there. Our challenge is to choose them. We usually know about them, but it's to select them, to organize them in a good editorial plan through all the different channels, and to actually bring the pieces together, whether it's an article, video, pictures, and that's a huge challenge for us because usually it's different people sitting in different places in the world, and that's why we end up going to agencies because it's impossible for us internally just to put all these people together and work on each and every piece of content we want. So yeah, so that's the challenge we have.
So if I may,
Go ahead.
I think it's not an easy answer, right? It's not an answer black and white generic. I think you need to start to segment basically what kind of content generically. I mean, when it comes to, for example, from our perspective, there's clear, or coming to your specs, there are clear content which is related to a product, or actually that comes with a corporate brand on it, if you want, right? And that's clever. It's a non-negotiable. Although you may have actually external resource supporting writing that, but it's basically the company as a sender, and it's kind of with certain level of quality set, certain expectations. This is how it comes from. It looks very kind of corporate-driven content to some degree. Then you actually have more kind of how you engage generically the audiences, which is then connected then to social and how you actually enables kind of the discussion. And this is where actually then you're getting more into an agency outsourcing model partially, to have kind of editorial supporting around that, and you plan your various communication channels, and you plan which campaign goes when. Here's kind of the 160 character tweets to use around that. That's for me clearly a candidate for outsourcing, because coming into the capability, it's not something that I will be able to have enough in-house to build kind of whole thing, and that's why it is clearly competency I need to outsource. And then the third component is about crowdsourcing, and it's how you get actually the community engaged around that, but still driving in the same patterns to some degree you want to have, but still also enabling kind of critical questions about that. And that's why actually the third category is where actually you're not necessarily producing content, but actually you're enabling content production, but you're not involved generically. Well, you may retweet it, you kind of engage or extend the reach, but I think that you need to look at different categories of content generation generically.
Well, in a world where IT and accounting and a host of other services are outsourced, it does somewhat beg the question if a brand should be a kind of content creator, especially at the kind of sharp end of thought leadership and the areas in which content creators, publishers have competencies and would be able to lend it to brands. But I think that's possibly what I'm trying to drive at here, is the balance between the obvious content creation that you have to create in order to kind of feed the social beast, but also trying to balance with some content creators that you can bring in as partners. Stefan?
Yeah, I would like to kind of jump in on the crowdsourcing. We tried that, and it worked surprisingly well. The chart with the stories, these were all crowdsourced stories, so filmmakers being part of a competition, and it's amazing what people, how good the content is that you get from the crowd. So it's really it was a very nice addition to our production of other type of content.
So a third option, internal, external, but potentially customer based or crowdsourced.
Yeah.
I think outsourcing your content generation to your customers is a fascinating thing, because you can stimulate it through the provision of the framework, whether that's an event or some sort of discussion forum. But when you get the customers talking with each other about the different things that they're seeing, particularly on a global scale, so we have buyers and sellers, bringing them together and sharing those perspectives. That's back to that idea of you can't fake it. You're getting it directly from the customers. It's difficult to plan for that. And we've had a couple of examples where we couldn't possibly have expected it to happen, but it's happened. It's happened phenomenally well. And then replicating that's difficult again, because you might think, well, it worked, and what was it about that demographic of those people in that room that decided they wanted to continue the dialogue afterwards? And generally, so we're creating almost all of our content in-house. In fact, we're creating content that we're not even servicing through the marketing channels, because it's being delivered bilaterally to the customers in a tailored way. Getting the customers in the kind of case study environment to talk about how it helped them achieve their ambitions is infinitely valuable.
Well, and you've talked to me a lot about your interest and passion for social engagement, and it'd be great if you could kind of elaborate further on how that content is then fueling discussions or engagement through social, which is somewhat surprising to me, as I mentioned in the pre-session, because every financial institution I've ever spoken to has put their arm out quite firmly against kind of testing social because of fear of regulatory issues. So it's fascinating that you've managed to move into that space.
Well, we're only just starting to scratch the surface. And I think that the regulatory regime is there to protect the customer, to protect the consumer. But these are consumers that may want to choose a network to talk about themselves, talk about their industries, and we can use the various listening and monitoring tools to understand what they're interested in. But it's like this idea of you can't, how do you describe it? You can't just barrel over in the party and introduce yourself. You must have to wait for that opportunity. So we're using it en masse to listen to what our customers are interested in, and then trying to match what we would want to tell them anyway with a higher degree of certainty that they'll be interested. On the retail side of the bank, the social media, if you think of something like Twitter, is obviously a key method for customer care. But we also listen to it for product development, proposition development, and so on. But I think everyone in financial services is only scratching the surface there. And back to that thing of faking it, if you have a compliance-approved, pre-agreed set of tweets, there's only so far that you can take that. Right.
Christian, you're very active in the social enterprise, and you mentioned in our pre-session again your focus on the change in the way buying influence on buyers and the potential changes that's making to your own kind of brand and communication strategies. Can you build on that element a bit from the Microsoft perspective?
Yeah, I think as said, and we've seen throughout the four discussions we already had, that one of the fundamental transformation that we need to think about is you cannot just basically turn on and turn off B2B or B2C, right? You're talking to human being. And as part of that human being actually also has obviously during his free time a social network engagement, would it be through Twitter, Facebook, you name it. But you see more and more of that's actually happening in-houses as well, right? So you basically kind of Facebook-style in-houses through technologies, for example, EAME, that enables kind of engagements and discussions about that. And through that, you certainly have kind of, I wouldn't say two parallel worlds, but you are addressing basically social, you enable kind of decision-making processes or influencing decision-making process by involving within an organization your own social community, if you want, right? So without going outside, you certainly have an involvement of people within the organization. They may give an opinion or giving you real-time insights of what's happening on the front or in the market that in the past you may not have thought about it.
Right.
And that's why that social enterprise actually will influence even more on how basically you make decisions, because as you said also before, many of the decisions are being made before any lead has been generated. So again, think about basically a BDM, would it be a chief marketing officer, would it be a chief of staff, you name it. Certainly just by looking at what's happening socially internally of the organization, get his thinking already pre-influenced, right? And that is a kind of a new momentum as well, because they're bringing in basically their experience from the outside into the organization, and they're new to the local, the social enterprise, and through that influencing the strategy. So it is quite interesting on how things are changing because of these social networks, but again, it's also social network within an organization, because a lot of things don't want to go out of the organization generically.
Can you use those insight and learnings into buying decisions for media? Can you use some of the extractions that you take from the social engagement to say do programmatic buying against a business audience, or potentially invest in sites that have higher levels of discussion around topics you're seeing trending within the social market?
I do think, because certainly if I look at now on our own perspective, I think it'll be the head of the game. I'm not saying we are there, but if we think it'll be the head of the game, if we suddenly have, for example, an account manager based on sales, being able to report real time what was the experience you just had from a customer perspective, what is happening, and then from marketing perspective, I see this information as real time, it does influence real time what is happening generically.
Right.
And so it is certainly becoming a data-driven approach also within the organization, because you get real-time information through social network within the organization. So will it be influence my decision-making process in terms of how we drive marketing? Yeah, absolutely. Because I have real-time information directly from the sources, from people that are directly connect with the customer,
right.
which maybe in the past you had kind of to do market research style, whatever. And so to some degree, it's kind of predicting some of the stuff that's happening.
Fair enough. Any questions from the audience? If you want to go ahead and raise your hand, we'll try to work those in. Nothing just as yet, but Chuck, go ahead.
Right.
Actually, we'll wait for the mic just a second.
Even though I think it's a power of this conference that we have agencies and advertisers and media companies here, I basically come from the media side, and all of our clients are on the media side. So I have a question for all of you. What would be, two questions, is what have you done, so fact, and what would entice you to use media companies for something rather agency-like? A lot of what media companies are hoping to claw back in this spending is activities that we associate with agencies. And listening to you all, you basically all used the word agencies when you got to anything that was more complex or looking at the mix. So have you used media companies? And is that a pipe dream that you would? What would make you use a media company for some of these more advisory agency-like roles?
You have an answer for that? We're just coming off a pitch, in fact, where we look for key publisher partners. And we pitch part of the media budget to focus on a partner that we feel delivers the most interesting content. And we gravitate, or I think the publishers that end up in a short list or end up getting the job were thought leaders in the field. So we ended up, for instance, with New Yorker, which is not something you would think about when you are a B2B company, but they deliver that. Or the Atlantic, I don't know, in the US it's obviously a different media landscape, but we look for thought leadership, quite frankly, and I think that's something that the marketing people cannot deliver necessarily, not even the engineers, because they're very much into their product. And that perspective, I see that clearly in the field of publishers.
Yeah, we obviously work with some media companies to help us identify the best media, particularly printed press, some key websites around the world, local websites where we need to have a presence. But right or wrong, to me, the scope of the agency is broader. And again, it's back to this dialing thing, between all the marketing tactics. And when you have one initiative, whether it's an advertising campaign, whether it's even a customer event, I think the winner will be the one who can come to us and tell us, for your initiative, let's call it an initiative, you need to use all these different channels, and this is the intensity that you need to put in social media, this is what you need to do on your website, this is what you need to do physically on the ground, customer-facing things, and this is how we'll measure all these, and success looks like these parameters. And then somebody with a global view of these different channels will win, I guess, our business in the future more and more, because that's where we're struggling. Otherwise, we all work in silos, like somebody is doing social media here, somebody is doing website, another person is doing customer events, and we don't connect the dots where the dots have to be connected at one point.
Well, and to the extent that media owners have an audience, which is a group of customers and prospects that you'd still like to engage with, and the traditional kind of value proposition of a media owner, to the extent to which they can plug into these things that we've been talking about so far, I think it's also an opportunity for media owners to be more of a marketing services partner. Because if you crowdsource content, one of the best places to crowdsource content from an industry might well be the leading industry publication, who has a pre-existing relationship with a large group of those individuals. And to be able to partner with them in that way hopefully makes them a better media partner.
Yeah. And for us, every year we have certain themes we want to run. So this year it will be, in a way, the renaissance of manufacturing in the US. So jobs are coming back. I think we see that. And it's not necessarily the B2B publication that delivers that type of content. No? And that's why we have made these choices. And another one, why we took that decision for a particular publisher was the way they place advertising. So native advertising is a bit the buzzword this year, and I thought the ones we chose executed quite well on that way of making advertising more part of the publisher experience without compromising the journalistic independence.
I think for the fact question, we have been doing it more. I've only been doing this job for a year, but all the media that I'm engaging with and all the agencies that I work with, I think of them all as acting in that agency style. Mostly because I've come into it when print and digital are finding that mix, and we're seeing the greatest impact with the media or the opportunities that are brought to us that offer an integrated print, event and digital, because that starts to deliver that cohesiveness which I talked about. But it still is always going to be a standalone estate. Now we have a limited number of universal titles, which have a very limited number of universal titles that have that appeal and can offer that integrated approach. But even then, you're still asking the customer, the consumer, the client to choose one channel over another. So I think where I'd like to work most is with the aggregator, who can pull it together in one place. So we've seen this in the advent of when iPads were only like 3 years old, but very soon after they came along came something like Flipboard, which offered you that curated effect. Well, I think the customers who are multi-banked, who will come to our website to transact, but they don't necessarily see our website as a natural destination to learn. Well, if I want to educate and engage them, which I do, then I need to make my content available. I need to be generous with it and put it out in the channels that they will find suitable for them, whether it's 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. And whatever stage they're at in their career. So I'm most interested in that agency type role of the aggregators, and I don't necessarily know who fills that space, but that's the biggest opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is I think agency, media, you name it, will absolutely transform generically. And if I look at as the world gets complex and complexer, you need to touch a customer in a 360-degree environment. You indeed basically going to need to work with an aggregator generically, and whoever that's going to be generically. Because if you look at all the social channels, if you look at the way in different communication channels and how you engage in different audiences, you're going to need to have a strong partner manage around that. So whoever that generically going to be. I think that's the key point, is generically media agency or agency generically might change completely in the next few years because the world is getting so complex on how you manage it.
A question in the back?
Morning, Debbie Williams, Smart B2B Marketing. Thanks for the insights this morning. I'd like to go back to the challenge on data. We've heard, I think, from all of you consistently how important it is to understand the customer and that we're actually engaging with individuals. I'm wondering how you're coping with the challenge of big data and the volume of data that's coming through from all of these multi-channels that we're needing to engage with. And I'd like to pose that question first of all to Conor. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We generate an enormous amount of data ourselves, so I don't know how many petabytes we're up to at the moment. I don't even know what a petabyte is, but it's enormous. And so I think there's this assumption from customers, and this emerging assumption from customers, that they've given us this data and they're expecting us to do something with it. And certainly on the wholesale banking side, the opportunity to look for signals in behavior of the customers, if they're moving more and more money out of Korea, what does that mean? And being able to arm the RM, the salesperson, to have a reasoned discussion. That's not necessarily the role of marketing, but that's a business challenge opportunity. And I think that you only need to look at the device that you have in your pocket, and it's starting to tell you things before you need to know them. And I think customers are raising that level of expectation. So how are we dealing with the challenge? We're assimilating the data that which we do get, and we're trying to match what we know with those opportunities. So what that means in practice is the media that comes to me and says, I can match our editorial content with your thought leadership in milliseconds, microseconds, with the right level of targeting. I'm paying attention, because suddenly I'm maximizing the chances that I'm telling people things they need to know, not based on the role that they perform, but on what they're looking for. So I wouldn't call that big data. I think that's just smart data at this stage, and then we'll continue to capture it and try and mine that data for greater purpose later.
Okay. Working in a few more questions. We've got one over here. Yep.
Can you hear me? Yes. Rich Sutcliffe from Haymarket. and Michael, just to help you out, this is an utterly self-serving question.
Okay.
I just wonder, you talked a lot about the sort of challenges of working across huge amounts of channels and huge territories. How much of your budgets do you plan and buy on a global basis or on a cross-territory basis as opposed to local? And are there any trends in how those shifts are moving?
Well, that's a difficult one, to be honest, because I obviously have a regional responsibility, so it's hard to see the global spend or the global scope of all the marketing initiatives. But
I guess for your situation, how much of it is European versus Europe market by market?
Okay, like
yeah, local
okay.
versus centralized.
It's probably still a good 60% global and 40% local, at least.
Christian, for you?
So I cannot answer in terms of numbers, but I can answer in terms of organization, how we made it happen. So at the moment, for example, media is bought globally. And so we actually have 5 people actually driving the international media team. And that's a fundamental transformation compared to 2 years ago, where actually each individual market talked to their EAME media agency, you name it, into now kind of a more consistent approach. And you'll see that more and more happening in order to be able to connect kind of opportunities generically.
Conor?
We're transforming, so exactly as Christian says, for the media it's managed globally, but because we have such a mix that isn't advertising and media driven, it's so many events, those are managed to a global framework but activated locally, so it's evolving.
And Stefan?
Media mostly global, and the events are local, and we're working to connect that better.
And a follow-up question to that, we have a workshop on this later this afternoon on mobile, but we talked again in the pre-session about the investments that have been made, and more importantly, the large amounts of professional audiences where very high penetrations on smartphones and tablets. And a slight pain point for any media owner is that investment is not yet being matched in any way, shape, or form with the spend or with the focus that is being seen from brands. If each of you could maybe just comment on any experience you've had in mobile thus far and any perhaps drivers that's keeping you from investing further in mobile platforms. And if I actually bring the question to Stefan first, just coming back to the other end.
I think it's, well, we do have a part of the media plan that is going into mobile. So there are platforms to buy into mobile, but I think there's a bit of a classification question, because I have the Twitter feed here. Is that a social or is it mobile? You know? So I think a lot of what is classified as social may be actually mobile communication. So I think that it's getting, and obviously you can't force people to, it's not something you can't interrupt the mobile experience to give you a message. So I don't know. I have trouble wrapping my head around it as a category itself. I think it's social, it's publishing, it's I don't quite see it as a different category.
Fair enough. Conor?
I think it's a difference of, are you trying to engage or are you trying to execute? Is the client trying to do something or are they trying to learn something? So our mobile strategy is to allow them to execute online in the device of their choice, and there's been an awful lot of investment in that, and a surprising amount of success. We didn't really foresee how willing people would be to authorize hundreds of millions of dollars of payments from an iPhone. But we built it anyway, and then we were pleasantly surprised with the level. On the engagement side and the education side, discovering things and learning, we're trying not to presuppose exactly what format the customer wants to use. We're trying to make sure that our content is accessible through all of our channels where they choose. So we're more reliant on the media owners to produce an experience which transcends the device of fashion today. Right.
And Christian?
Yeah, I think that quick answer. I think that there are 2 points. One is the categorization. We need to be careful what we're looking at, because second, if you look at the technology how it goes, if you now go to Microsoft.com on a mobile phone and use exactly the same site with the PC, actually it's the same technology, and so we're not investing more.
Right.
This side is auto-adjusting. So that's why it's tough to look at these numbers rather than kind of looking behavior and how you push the channel and the content through that. So I think there's categorization. Secondly, obviously technology that makes it partially very cheaper today to go with.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And as far as we're concerned, we're very much like what Christian just said. Obviously, all our channels are available on the mobile devices. But what we are pushing on mobile devices right now is a lot of content, but it's for the sales organization. We have, as I was saying, we are in a contact sport. So in the end, that link with customers is usually made with a salesman that actually tries to sell the piece of equipment to the customer. And for this, he needs a ton of information, ton of data, specs, of course, but also applications, videos, user-friendly type of content that he can share with customers, or he can just use to e-train himself before he visits the customers, etc. And for us, this is the next huge challenge, to create all that content on tablets and mobile phones. And we are starting that journey right now.
Okay. We've got time for about one or two more questions. I know Joel in the back has a question. If we can get a mic to Joel. Yep.
Thanks, I've already got one, Michael. Joel Harrison from B2B Marketing. I was really interested in the conversation just now about publishers and agencies and the differences between them. Without any disrespect to any agencies, and I've got to be careful what I say because I'm sat next to two of them or in between two of them, so I've got to be really diplomatic in how I frame this. Surely the difference between agencies and publishers is integrity and objectivity. And I just was curious about the extent to which you recognise that and valued it as part of your decision-making process in terms of which one you work with. Do you work with a publisher because they maybe have a different degree of gravitas? Would you work with an agency because maybe they're a bit more flexible?
You're surrounded. Who's going to answer?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree.
Diplomacy for you.
The thing is, how do you price it, you know? I mean...
so pricing's the key?
Huh?
Is pricing the key then?
Yeah, it's usually tied to media buy. So you want the content and you have to buy the media, or it's... what are you buying? Are you buying the audience of that journalist or that brand? Are you buying the content? But I think there's, as I mentioned before, that there's the demand for thought leadership and objectivity. And I don't think we have it figured out yet, but the demand is there definitely. And I don't see agencies doing that. I don't see that contrast really. I think that no agency approached us with the same, with really journalistic type marketing production. I don't know, just throwing it back.
Fair enough. Well, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to reserve the... Oh, sorry, one more, go ahead.
Thank you, Michael. So my name is James. I work with a company called BrightTag. It's a data logistics business. So slightly self-serving, but I'd love to hear a couple of anecdotes about data, measurement, analytics initiatives that you're particularly proud of or passionate about.
I'll probably refer that to Christian.
So we put the whole initiative down at Microsoft actually to go into a tight integrated data analytics. And so at the moment we're running out of the UK a marketing analytics hub that actually is serving the whole Western European area. Connecting to the big data discussion just before, for me there's tons of data. It is more the insights you get out of that. And I think the best thing we actually been able to do around that, because everyone had the access partially of the data before, even though they are now better and in a different quality, is by putting a center of competencies about insights, it drove kind of new way of decision-making process. Right, so I think there's kind of operation excellence, just making sure you get the right data and you get the data in a database somehow. And secondly is the more strategic level is what are you doing really with this data. And that is also a shift because data you can collect, I mean, just by browsing, you're delivering so much data, but what are the real insights you get? And so we're driving that now for whole Western Europe actually, centrally. And it's interesting to see kind of the transformation we're going through here between kind of, no, you can do it's local, cultural, blah, 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 into now actually even a social command center that enables us kind of real-time insights of what's going on with this information, which is actually quite a new transformation for the whole company around that. So that's kind of, hope that answers your question too.
Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask one quick question. This hasn't, none of the speakers actually knew I was going to ask this question, so the response is going to be quite spontaneous, we hope. This afternoon, we've got a session, actually the closing session, which is on the future of B2B media and marketing. And one of the things we're going to do, we've got two top executives from publishing side and two top executives from the kind of agency world, hopefully providing us with some their own personal perspective on what the future of B2B media and marketing is. And those in the audience at that time will do a show of hands and see who kind of made the best case. But potentially to give us a bit of a lead from ultimately the people who are going to decide what the future of B2B media and marketing is. In one sentence or less, what would you say is the future of B2B marketing? And I'll throw it to Stefan first.
Yeah, I think it's a triangle in a way. I think it's data, it's relationships, it's stories, and technology.
A long sentence, but got it. Conor.
Relevant topical content delivered in a medium of the customer's choice with an element of social engagement to follow.
Wow. Did anybody get that down?
I had a 15-second head.
Okay.
So I'll make it different. It's going to be completely different than we think today.
Okay. And Julien.
I think it's going to be integration to all the different channels, of all the different channels together.
Excellent. Okay, well, we've got a coffee break scheduled now, and I'd like you to just first thank our speakers for this morning's first session, who, again, coming from 4 different sectors, provided a lot of different perspective, but I think some of the trend, or some of the themes that came through, and I expected to come through, was the focus that they're putting on lots of areas within B2B media and marketing that may or may not involve media. And you know, given that there are lots of media owners here, I know that overall those media owners and media agencies are interested in the components that are media driven, but I think it's also very important for you to consider the elements that B2B brands may well be spending and emphasizing, at the very least ensuring that whatever you're offering somehow integrates or complements or provides them with a medium to extend some of those things that they're focusing on.